Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips the balance in favor of fair use. Okay, you guys, trigger warning, there's violence in this article. If you guys have any, triggers, through any type of violence, don't listen. This is from Radar. Sons of Anarchy star Johnny Lewis was a Scientologist, used the religion to help lead happy, successful life. By Radar staff. I love when they do that. September 27th, 2012. The late Sons of Anarchy star Johnny Lewis, who is suspected of murdering his elderly landlady, and I believe he did the cat in as well, I think, before falling to his death, was a high-profile Scientologist. RadarOnline.com has learned. Wonder if he was a second gen. The troubled 28-year-old is listed on numerous websites, message boards, and blogs as being a member of the controversial religion, cult, followed by the likes of Tom Cruise and Kirstie Alley. Ironically, one Scientology blogger who says his daughter did much of her early religious training with Lewis. I'm going to read that again. Ironically, one Scientology blogger who says his daughter did much of her early religious training with Lewis lists him in a category dedicated to the celebrities who use Scientology and Dianetics to help them live happy and successful lives. Following a speech, the troubled star gave crediting the religion. As RadarOnline.com previously reported, the actor, whose full name was Jonathan Kendrick Lewis, had a violent criminal history. I don't know about this, you guys. I'm just going to be honest. I didn't do that big of a background check on him, but I hate to just be throwing someone under the bus. I would prefer to do more research on that, because you know what Scientology does. Okay, I'm going to pass that, just because I want to vet that out. Authorities suspect him of murder after officers responded to reports of a lady screaming at a Los Feliz, California property, only to discover Lewis's body on the driveway and the body of an 81-year-old Catherine Davis inside. Police confirmed there was an altercation between the two, but that Lewis died from his fall from the rooftop. You know what? I don't trust this. I'm gonna go look at another article. Give me a minute here. Okay, you guys, this is a different article, but in fairness to this man, I'm not gonna just take everything at face value. I was reading another blog, and I'm gonna go look into that one. It wasn't very much information there, but someone had stated that he had a motorcycle accident and he had a head injury. So I don't know, because I haven't looked into it, but the previous article to me was a trash. They were saying he was a meth addict, he was in jail and all this. I don't trust stuff like that. So I'm going to read this with a grain of salt, but it also reminds me, and it's sad to me, that it seems to me like this young man needed help and nobody was helping him. I don't know that he had mental health. I'm not going to assume anything. But he more than likely was disconnected with some of his family in Scientology, was all by himself. And we all know if he was born into Scientology, you know how much trauma is involved. So that's why I'm not buying all these, oh, he was on meth and all this stuff. You know, he's a Hollywood actor. I think he could afford something more expensive than meth. So let's go on. This is from LA Mag, and it was dated January 30th, 2014, so this was 2 years later. The Secret Life of Johnny Lewis. He was a Hollywood actor who had it all, including a dark side that led to a grisly murder. And this is by Bill Jensen. We don't know what his mind state was when this happened. Hi, I'm John, your new neighbor. If Dan Blackburn wasn't completely stunned to see the bedraggled young man with intense blue eyes introducing himself at his doorstep, it was only because the former NBC newsman had just spent a good 15 minutes tracking his movements from his living room window. Wearing nothing but jeans and red shoes, Blackburn's visitor had been pacing up and down the pavement of this leafy corner of the Los Feliz Hills. He was slight and wiry with shaggy blonde hair. His bare torso was slick with sweat. There were other intrusions on the neighborhood's usual quiet on that late morning of September 26, 2012. A house painter was working on the first floor deck of Blackburn's home. The deck overlooked a 1927 Spanish-style mansion known as the Writer's Villa, where an elderly real estate broker and arts patron named Kathy Davis had opened her doors to generations of playwrights, screenwriters, novelists, and actors, while they developed their talents and adjusted to Hollywood life. "Nice to meet you, John," Blackburn replied with a raised eyebrow. The two men stood across from each other in Blackburn's doorway. Before John, who Blackburn would later learn was the actor Johnny Lewis, abruptly walked away and Blackburn returned to his morning routine. At 28, Lewis wasn't so much a new neighbor as a returning one. For 2 months in 2009, he had lived in the red suite of the Writer's Villa. Now, 3 years later, he had just moved back to the villa after being released from downtown's Twin Towers Correctional Facility, following a string of senseless, violent assaults. Keep in mind, I think this guy had a brain injury, and I'm going to look into it. I think there's some cover-up going on. His father had arranged the accommodations, hoping that the villa's calming influence would help steady his son after months of chaos. And you know, Scientologists don't believe in medication. So something is not smelling right here. After 30 minutes after meeting Lewis at his door, Blackburn heard his wife, Gloria, anxiously calling for him. He rushed outside to find Lewis on top of the house painter, pummeling him with his fist. The worker's face was covered in blood. Maybe there's some delusion going on? Specks of it were landing on the actor's body. Blackburn stepped in to pull the 5'10" Lewis off the painter, grabbing him by the shoulder and yelling at him to stop. In one motion, Lewis leaped to his feet and slugged Blackburn, who was in his I don't mean to laugh, who is in his 70s, in the eye. That tells me something's off. Knocking him to the ground. Lewis's expression was flat, his gaze distant. Psychosis, maybe brain injury. But he seemed to have superhuman strength. He didn't flinch as Blackburn stood up and landed a punch to his temple. Blackburn then struck him with a chair, which stunned him enough that Blackburn, his wife, and the painter were able to escape into the house. They tried to shut the front door, but Lewis stuck his arm through the opening as if in a scene from a horror movie. The three pushed their full weight on the door, slamming it 4 times until the arm finally slithered away. The group barricaded themselves inside and called the police. From a window, Blackburn saw Lewis leap over the waist-high fence around the deck and pounce on the wooden fence surrounding the writer's villa next door. His feet never seeming to touch the ground, he scaled the fence and disappeared into the villa. He was like a low-key Spider-Man, says Blackburn. Within minutes, the police arrived to find a ghastly sight. Davis, the 81-year-old owner of the villa, was inside her home, beaten and strangled to death. Lewis, her tenant and attacker, was also dead in the middle of the driveway, his skull cracked in half. Oh my God. Well, you guys also know what goes on in LA. I'm not going to go too deep, you know. But I'm going to read on. It didn't take long for that morning's events to reach the tabloids. Actor Johnny Lewis had killed his landlady, Kathy Davis, then fallen or jumped to his death. More than a year later, the reasons why remain elusive. How could Lewis commit such a monstrous crime? The immediate assumption was that he was on drugs. The truth is far more complicated. Also, I don't know how autopsies are performed, but I wonder, do they do brain scans? Just 3 years earlier, Lewis was wrapping up his gig on the second season of Sons of Anarchy, the hit FX biker drama. As Kip Halfsack Epps, he played an eager prospect who did grunt work as he waited to become a patched-in member of the club. Halfsack got his nickname because of the testicle he had lost while serving in Iraq. So, that sounds like an Illuminati joke. There was something about the boyish, gentle way Lewis portrayed him that was a relief from all the macho testosterone of his fellow bikers. In the 2009 season finale, Halfsack is stabbed to death with a kitchen knife while trying to save a baby. Wow. Despite the character's popularity, Lewis had announced to Sons of creator Kurt Sutter that he wanted to leave the show. He told his father the storylines were getting too violent. Yeah, that's really violent. A working actor since he was a kid, I want to know if he was a Scientologist as a child. Lewis had earned teen heartthrob status in his early 20s with a recurring role as Dennis Chili Childress on Fox's sudsy series, The O.C. You know what all happens with those child actors, too. By 2005, he was a regular on the red carpet, often photographed with then-girlfriend Katy Perry on his arm. After his turn on The O.C. ended in 2006, Lewis was flushed with featured roles on popular TV procedurals such as Bones, CSI, and Criminal Minds. On the last, he played a darkly charismatic serial killer. But Lewis always saw himself as an artist and a writer, a lover of Keats, Kerouac, and Dostoevsky. He was constantly writing poems, screenplays, and the beginnings of 2 novels, and filled his journals with philosophical ruminations. So when he first heard about the writer's villa through a photographer who was taking his headshots, he was intrigued. It was a house in the hills for creative people, run by a sweet lady, he was told. In April 2009, he contacted Davis and moved into the Red Suite on the 2nd floor. He immediately took to the place, and to Davis. I hung out with him over there a few times, says Beau Garrett, an actress and one of Lewis's friends. I remember all the nice things he said about her and how she opened her place to artists and eccentrics. Between his 2 stays in the villa, he quit Sons of Anarchy, became a father, was in a serious motorcycle accident. Oh, see, that's what it is. I think he got a head injury there, and nobody's talking about it. And endured a painful custody battle and several arrests. I'm interested in what those arrests were for. He bounced in and out of jails, psychiatric wards, and rehab. Why is it they don't mention that he had a head injury in the accident? He attempted suicide. Judges, therapists, family members, friends, and former co-stars tried to intervene, then either drifted away or watched helplessly as he spiraled out of control. Which may explain why after his last stint in county lockup, Lewis sought the comfort and solace in the generosity of Kathy Davis. He remembered getting at the writer's villa. He planned to move back in and pull himself together. The house at 3605 Lowry Road was luxurious yet homey, with exposed wood beams and rustic antique furniture. Saltillo tile floors matched the walls, which were painted a warm red, yellow, and cream. The centerpiece of the house was a staircase inlaid with ceramic tiles, leading to one of 5 guest rooms, some with majestic views of the San Gabriel Mountains. Catherine Davis, known by most of her tenants as Miss Kathy, was a Texan who had moved to California in 1950. She attended UCLA and worked in various publishing jobs, before marrying James H. Davis. After she gave birth to a baby girl in 1958, Davis and her husband purchased the grand house in Los Feliz. By the 1980s, she was divorced, and her daughter, the writer Margaret Leslie Davis, was grown up. So Miss Kathy began a successful career as a real estate agent, using her spacious empty nest as a temporary base camp for her well-heeled clients as they house hunted. Over time, her home evolved into one of those idyllic, distinctly LA arrangements, an extended bed and breakfast for up-and-coming performers, directors, and of course writers. It was Davis, a lively woman with short gray hair and sparkling wit, who clinched the deal. Val Kilmer, Parky Posey, Paula Poundstone, and Chris Parnell all lived at the villa when they were on the rise. Enjoying the company of the good-natured landlady, Kathy was very friendly. Poundstone recalls, "One day I was waiting for a cab to the Burbank airport, which didn't come. Davis tried to calm the young comic and wrote her driving directions. But seeing the lunacy in my eyes and hearing me begin to stammer, she kindly offered to drive me herself, which I graciously accepted." If a picture audition went poorly, Miss Kathy would be there with open arms and homemade tamales. Her house was also an emotional refuge. Thomas Jane, the star of HBO's Hung, moved into the villa after a tough breakup with a live-in girlfriend in 2001. "I needed a quiet place to stay," he says. "I met Kathy and fell in love with her place immediately. The dark wood and heavy furniture relaxed me. It was a perfect place to lick my wounds." Through word of mouth, Davis's reputation in the upscale Hollywood community grew. When someone moved on, they would tell the next crop of promising talent about the villa. The rent was steep, between $1,650 and $3,000 a month for one bedroom, with a sitting area and private bath. There were common areas including a living room, a large flagstone patio, and manicured grounds, as well as shared kitchen. It was filled with successful people who were very ambitious, says comedian and character actor Taylor Negron, a former tenant. Everybody worked their ass off to get there, and they had to keep working their ass off. It's pretty. Belushi, Farley, Ledger, Monteith. We've read about what happened the following day. Maybe after a night partying with friends, they fell asleep and never woke up. Maybe they were alone in their room and mixed too many chemicals. There were warning signs those close to them would later say and rehab didn't take. The most talented people on the planet can seem hell-bent on being their own worst enemy. But Lewis was not a hard partier. Friends describe him as intoxicating, not intoxicated. He was more likely to drink tea and play chess until 3 a.m. than slam shots or pop pills. That's what made Johnny special, says actor and longtime friend Jonathan Trucker. No drugs, no alcohol, just poetry and philosophy. Let me get a drink of water. As a native Angelino, Lewis was unique among the usual transplants who lived at the villa. The middle child of Michael and Devona Lewis, Johnny grew up in a Jewish-oriented household in North Hollywood in Sherman Oaks. His family also practiced Scientology. See? His parents attained what is known within the religion as the highest available level, operating Thetan, or OT8. An OT8, according to the writings of Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard, refers to someone in a spiritual state who offers knowing and willing cause over life, thought, matter, energy, space, and time. Johnny's mother began taking her son on auditions when he was 6. He was cast in his first role at 7, a bit part in an escalator safety video featuring a rapping cartoon raccoon. He worked in commercials, including a Pizza Hut spot, and his bright smile and solid acting chops scored him appearances on Seventh Heaven, Malcolm in the Middle, and Drake and Josh. At 18, with money in his pocket, Lewis left his parents' home in the Valley and moved to Hollywood, where he lived with other actors in what was widely known in the entertainment industry as the Wilton Hilton. It was the frat row of young Hollywood, says says director Doug Usher, one of Lewis's best friends who lived there with the young actor and future stars like Adam Brody, Brett Harrison, and Ashley Simpson. In the mid-2000s, Lewis began dating a fledgling pop singer named Katy Perry. This is sus. The son of high-level Scientologists and the daughter of strict Pentecostal Christians. Because, you know, Katy Perry she reeks Christianity, doesn't she? They gravitated to each other. His Joker-like smile and just fell out of bed style counterbalanced Perry's teeny bopper image. The romance would be short-lived but potent, at least for Perry. 2 songs off her Teenage Dream album, The One That Got Away and Circle the Drain, are rumored to be partly about Lewis. The actor's choice of roles was eclectic. After The O.C. and other TV shows, Lewis appeared in a one-off play in such indie fare as 2007's Palo Alto, California, in which he played an awkward teenager. He was incredibly talented, says his friend Usher, who edited Lewis's demo reels throughout his career. He was loved by everybody. He merged with different groups really easily. He fit in everywhere. Everywhere except the show that made him famous, Sons of Anarchy, which just finished its 6th season, is not only popular with viewers, it's a critical success. After 2 seasons as half-sack, however, Lewis became restless and asked to be written out of the show. Johnny wasn't happy, said series creator Sutter in a 2009 interview about Lewis's departure. Creatively, he really wanted out of his contract. It sounded like he didn't like all that violence. He told us he left because the show was getting into gratuitous violence, says his father, Michael Lewis, a Scientologist, by the way. He didn't want to communicate that as an artist. After leaving Sons, Lewis would never return to television. Instead, he appeared in a couple of low-budget features and some short films, though he was more interested in living off his son's money while he finished writing his first novel about a young musical genius making his way in San Francisco. In the summer of 2009, Lewis learned that his new girlfriend, actress Diana Marshall Green, was pregnant. Lewis was thrilled. On April 6, 2010, Marshall Green gave birth to a girl, Kala May. We had a beautiful baby shower, says Usher. It should have been a great thing. Though no longer romantically involved, the couple settled into an apartment in Hollywood to raise their child together. The arrangement, however, didn't work, and Lewis moved out. He soon found himself embroiled in what would be a long and painful custody battle, one that he would eventually lose. In late October 2011, Lewis lost control of his Triumph motorcycle near 29 Palms. At the hospital, the staff checked him for signs of a concussion, but he was allowed to leave after tests came back negative. Michael Lewis, however, noticed that his son's behavior was becoming erratic and bizarre. Had the accident shaken something loose in his brain, he wondered? The elder Lewis scheduled 2 MRIs, which Johnny refused to undergo. Friends picked up on Lewis's change in behavior, too. During an acting class in December, he kept speaking in a vaguely British accent. I asked him about it because I was confused, Tucker says, but he shrugged it off. By the new year, Lewis's behavior would turn from curious to dangerous. That British accent also reminds me of MKUltra. Hence, like Britney Spears, Madonna with the British accent. Kathy Davis, the beloved owner of the writer's villa, Johnny Lewis, was living in one of the villa's suites when he killed her in 2012. On the morning of January 3rd, 2012, Lewis was lounging in the Northridge condo he had bought for his parents, watching his mother cook omelets. Clad in pajama bottoms and a t-shirt, he announced he was going out for a stroll. As he walked past a neighboring unit, he thought he heard cries of distress and broke in, but the place was empty. Not long after, 2 men arrived and asked him to leave. Lewis went after them with an empty Perrier bottle, striking each on the head. A fight ensued, spilling out onto the patio. Lewis bit one of the men on the arm while attempting to flee. He was overpowered and detained until the police arrived. Just want to add in here too. I mean, it does sound like a head injury. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. But also, could it be a psychotic break? A lot of people do violent acts when they have psychotic breaks. Or it could have been a combination of a brain injury. Lewis claimed he was acting in self-defense. Police charged him with trespassing, burglary and assault with a deadly weapon, and he was sent to the Twin Towers jail. Twin Towers jail? I'm not going to go there right now. 3 days later, his behavior landed him in the psychiatric ward as a 5150 code for involuntary confinement. He remained there for 72 hours when Lewis's father bailed him out. His discharge summary read, chief complaint, blunt head trauma, and suicidal. This is really starting to be very suspicious. I mean, the dad is saying he wanted all these tests done, but if this guy had a serious head injury, shouldn't he have gotten more care? I mean, I don't know. Something doesn't add up. After a total of 8 days behind bars, because that's where you put people with brain injuries, you know, Lewis returned to his parents' house in Northridge. He was a physical and mental wreck. You know, Scientologists, they don't believe in doctor care. His face was puffy and he sported 2 black eyes. 2 black eyes? He looked like a wounded, broken animal, recalls his older sister Anna. He acted like one too. He wouldn't let anyone touch him or even get near him. What happened to him in the hospital? Just a question. He was acutely sensitive to light and began turning off all the lights in the house, eventually disabling the fuse box. The following weeks were a blur of self-destructive activity, including slashing his wrist in a suicide attempt. Michael and a network of family and friends kept a close eye on him. Instead of taking him to a psychiatric hospital, like handlers. By the end of January, Lewis seemed more stable, and his father decided to let him live on his own in Santa Monica. Well, see, I don't think he ever got better, because he needed help. Trouble started again immediately. On February 10th, Lewis was arrested for cold cocking a man. I don't mean to laugh. Was arrested for cold cocking a man outside a yogurt shop. Sounds like he was like having some kind of hallucinations. Like, why would you do that? Like, unless you thought somebody was saying something to you? He was released on $20,000 bail. Days later, he walked fully clothed into the ocean in Santa Monica and was hospitalized for hypothermia. Not psychosis? On February 18th, he was arrested again. What is this, like medical care by police officer? This time for trying to break into a woman's apartment in Santa Monica. He said he thought it was his friend's place. Again, he was released on bail. This probably was the head injury, but it really sounds very similar to psychosis. Like he's out of it. And he really needed help. Go and look at all the murders and suicides that have happened to young people in Scientology when they are not allowed to take medication. As his legal woes grew, or maybe psychosis grew, I'm just saying, Lewis's condition worsened like psychosis. That's what happens when it's untreated. In May 2012, Tucker picked up his friend for one of his many court appearances and was unsettled by the changes in his demeanor. So he's going to all these court appearances, and meanwhile he's like extremely psychotic. Sounds like he's hallucinating, he's delusional. Anything but get him some medication, right? It was another person completely, he says. He had a look I've only seen in disturbed veterans of war. His memory was scattered. He vacillated between basic lucid conversation and incoherence, otherwise known as psychosis. Yeah, it probably was a brain injury, but oh, this is really sad. Okay, he did get some medical care. Doctors prescribed Lewis the drugs Zyprexa and Abilify, both of which are used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. What if he had like internal bleeding in his brain, or a contusion, or a tumor? But he resisted taking any medication, that's a Scientology, and may have cheeked the pills, hiding them inside his mouth, pretending to swallow, then spitting them out. Part of the problem, according to his father, is the father the handler here? I mean, I'm sorry that he lost his son, but was that Lewis had yet to receive a clear diagnosis. Well, at least, I give the father credit. He was trying to help him. He wasn't saying you can't have medication, but isn't it weird how his son wasn't taking the medication? Something's not adding up. This sounds like cover-up. Was he bipolar, psychotic, or, as his father believed, suffering from traumatic brain injury? We got the motorcycle head injury, then he's beaten in the head 17 times. How do you know it was 17 times? Did you count? Like, it's just weird. Michael says, then when he's in jail, he is pounding his own head against the concrete. Something was bothering him in his head. Oh, this is sad. This is sad. Pounding his own head against the concrete and attempting to leap from the second-story pier. You know what he was trying to do. He wanted, whatever was going on, he wanted it to stop. Then you have the doctor's own diagnosis of brain trauma, and that's just the stuff we know about. A cameraman records the crime scene, including Lewis's blood on the driveway. Oh, jeez. That's horrible. I'm sorry, you guys. Head trauma can trigger behavioral changes, says Christopher Giza, MD. No shade to this Christopher Giza, but I do wonder if he's a Scientology doctor. I don't know. Christopher Giza, MD, a pediatric neurologist and neuroscientist. No, maybe not. At the UCLA Brain Injury Research Center. Some areas of the brain are particularly prone to traumatic brain injury. If you have an injury in the frontal lobes, you can have significant changes in behavior. It's probably what happened to him. Irritability, impulse control problems, and at the extreme end, violent outbursts. But Lewis was neither diagnosed with nor treated for severe head trauma. See, that's what I'm saying. Like something's not adding up here. And the symptoms his father, the handler, sorry father, that's what it sounds like, describes after the October 2011 motorcycle accident. I don't want to be cruel, because he did lose his son, I'm sorry for that. Headache, sensitivity to light are indicative of a mild injury, such as a concussion, says Giza, which would trigger aggressive behavior. Yeah, there's a lot of studies that have been done on that. It happens a lot in football players, and it also happens with a lot of veterans in wartime. Lewis's lawyer was working to persuade the courts to allow Lewis to swap jail time for a stay in a treatment center. I don't know, you guys. He wouldn't take the medication in the psychiatric hospital, but he's taken other drugs. Do you guys see how it's not adding up to me? While incarcerated, however, Lewis didn't appear to have a substance abuse problem, see? And his friends said he didn't drink or do drugs. See? Something's funny here. I did a lot of drug seeking in that place, says Tim Woodhead, a 26-year-old former inmate who became friends with Lewis in Twin Towers. There were a lot of opportunities that he turned down multiple times. See? This is the saddest thing, man. Oh, what a sad story. On May 23, 2012, after 2 months in lockup, Lewis was transported to Ridgeview Ranch in the foothills of Altina with an activities list that included equine therapy, yoga meditation, and art therapy. Ridgeview calls itself a dual diagnosis facility, treating residents for psychosis and substance abuse. But he didn't have substance abuse. Jeez. His family believed his staying there was better than being in jail. I wonder is his family, are they a wealthy family? I just wonder, like, a little bit more about them. Lewis revealed as much in an email sent to Tucker and other friends who shared it with Lewis's father on June 12, 2012. The core of the story is that I was involved in a fight. My actions were self-defense, but my means were a glass bottle. After a few court dates, a stint in county jail, this guy needed help and all he was in was jail. And the realization that there is no self-defense law in California, I am back on my feet and doing well. The court case is still ongoing, but from what we've heard, it has every good chance of getting dropped outright or disappearing with time served. At the end was a postscript that read, on a side note, we are pleading rehab to avoid trial. Ooh, maybe that's why they were trying to get him in there, just to kind of dodge jail time? I don't know. Addicted to marijuana, what a trip. At Ridgeview, Lewis's claims of being addicted to marijuana didn't fly with the trained counselors and fellow addicts as Michael, so he switched and pretended to be addicted to alcohol. That demon, rum man, it possessed me. At that point, he said they started to believe him. Despite the questionable diagnosis and treatment for a disease he didn't believe he had, Lewis's mental state began to improve after a few months. In one of his final journal entries from July 2012, Lewis wrote, "Felt more whole today, more complete, like parts of myself had been stolen in my sleep and scattered all over the world, and now they begun to return. I'm more determined than ever now. I'll face what I am. I'll face what I was." What he was facing was serious time for the Northridge bottle assault. His lawyer sought a deal. Lewis would spend an entire year at Ridgeview in lieu of jail, but Lewis was so confident his case would be dropped. It was a self-defense. He fired his lawyer. He was not thinking right. Defiantly acting as his own attorney, that's a bad idea, which Judge Cynthia Ulfig allowed. Lewis figured he would spend a few days in jail, then resume normal life. No more curfews and mandatory group sessions at Ridgeview. He would be free. Also, too, what made him attack the guy? He keeps saying self-defense. I believe he was like, there were some kind of hallucinations there. Instead, he was sentenced to a year in jail and hauled back to Twin Towers. But because of the county's overcrowded jails, Lewis's sentence was drastically reduced. He spent a total of 6 weeks in jail before being released on September 21st. The night he got out, he checked into Los Feliz Hotel in Atwater Village. The following Sunday, his father helped him shop for new clothes before driving him to the valley to pick up his Triumph. Lewis asked his father to contact the writer's villa to see if there was a space available. Since his son wasn't agreeable to returning to Ridgeview, Michael believed the quiet and peaceful surroundings of the villa would be the next best thing. It didn't occur to me to say, oh, by the way, he was having problems, he says. Like hallucinations and delusions? And violence? Oh, just sad. This is a place he was familiar with, and they will give him a lot of love. Kathy Davis made sure his old room would be ready and waiting for him. Wow. On Monday, Lewis moved into his room on the second floor of the villa. Michael called the following day to check in on his son. Johnny answered agitatedly. "I'm busy, what do you want?" He eventually calmed down and told his father they would talk later. It was the last time Michael Lewis spoke to his son. Lewis is half-sack in a scene from the FX series Son of Anarchy. As the police pulled up to the writer's villa, they spotted Johnny Lewis in the middle of the driveway, lying face up and lifeless. Looking at the villa, they saw a patio and a roof, which rose about 15 feet above the ground. They noted that Lewis's left eye socket was caved in. His skull was smashed just to the left of center. He had plunged from either the second floor of the roof and died instantly. Inside the scene was even more gruesome. I'm gonna pass this, you guys. I don't want to read this on YouTube. It's just too much. Okay, I'm gonna skip all this stuff. It's too much. So, they were just talking about the gruesome crime scene and how it happened and how she was killed, etc. And how that he passed. Investigators believe that just minutes after he had introduced himself to Blackburn, Lewis went back to the villa and confronted Davis in her room. No one knows what fueled his rage, but one rumor floated among Davis's friends was that he had gone to the fuse box and turned off the electricity the night before the attack. Davis had confronted him and given him a stern warning to never do that again. So I think he thought like maybe the electricity was bothering him. It could have been. Whatever the reason, if there is one, the results were unthinkable. Lewis had punched Davis several times and strangled her with his bare hands. Oh my God. It was unclear whether he'd used a hammer found in his room on Davis. Hammer can be code, just so you guys know. Davis, but the force of his beatings was so severe that the investigators believe Lewis may have stomped on Davis's, and then he also killed her cat. Okay, I'm not going to read all that. Moments later, investigators believe Lewis went outside and attacked the house painter in Blackburn before his Spider-Man climbed back into the villa. He then ascended to either the upper patio or the roof. It's unclear whether he jumped or slipped. His death was officially ruled as an accident, not a suicide. Something was wrong in his brain. That's terrible. As the news broke, a theory quickly emerged on the internet. Lewis had been on bath salts. Now, you guys listen to this. I don't know. That does not add up to me. It just doesn't add up to me. He's got a brain injury. He's on bath salts. Come on. He didn't even want to take the psychiatric medication in the hospital. Me personally, I don't buy it. And all his friends and people that knew him said he didn't drink, said he didn't do drugs. Somebody's lying here. Oh, so this was a theory. Of course they're not telling anybody who said it, right? You know what I mean? Of course. An illegally manufactured designer drug containing an amphetamine-like chemical called, I can't read it, MDPV. The use of bath salts had made headlines in the spring. You can't just say somebody's on that, but I mean, that's the world we live in now. The snortable and injectable powder was reportedly the catalyst for a handful of grisly attacks around the country. But he had a head injury. One by the notorious 31-year-old Florida cannibal who was shot by police while biting and devouring the face of another man in the middle of a busy street. Of course, it couldn't be from all the chemicals people have been throwing in their bodies for the last 4 years. Just saying. The New York Daily News also threw out the possibility of another designer drug called Smiles. So they're just making up stuff here. Hold on, you guys. This is too much. Okay, I have to not even read that stuff. It's so ridiculous that they're just, oh, this is a popular drug and this is happening, so that's a theory. Really? So, but Lewis's toxicology report, which came back 2 months after the incident, indicated that there were no drugs, salts, meth, or cocaine, or his prescribed antipsychotic medication. Boy, I must be a genius. I'm being sarcastic. The toxicology report was a disappointment. If it wasn't drugs, what drove Johnny Lewis to murder? Is anybody putting together that he was in a very severe motorcycle accident where he sustained a head injury? Like it's just a huge mystery? Something's not adding up. Critics of Scientology. Why is it always that title? How about people that ask questions? Like they demonize people that ask any questions about Scientology the same way they do conspiracy theorists. And that's a whole nother thing. Have pointed to the church's resistance to psychiatry, yes, as a possible reason why Lewis's early behavioral issues may have been untreated. Yeah. Lewis's father discounts that assumption. Of course he does. Deny, deny, deny. Just like, I can't think of the guy's name, but the young man in Florida who needed, I believe it was an antipsychotic medication, and his father took it away from him, and he wound up committing suicide, I believe. So, he says the same kind of stupid, idiotic stuff. Lewis's father discounts that assumption, claiming that he pursued and encouraged psychiatric treatment for his son. It was Johnny who refused to comply. I don't know. I don't know, you guys. I just don't know. Those who were once close to Lewis expressed their grief. Us Weekly reported that Katy Perry was devastated and that her best friend, actress Shannon Woodward, tweeted, "Johnny Lewis, I love you deeply and madly and always. My heart is broken in a million little pieces." She then added, "Johnny Lewis was one of my best friends. He was very, very ill. His actions were a despicable result of that. It was not who he was." Among the 140 character condolences, one connection flatly admitted he wasn't surprised by Lewis's homicidal frenzy. His former boss, Kurt Sutter. His tweet read, "I wish I could say that I was shocked by the events last night, but I was not." So all these people were seeing this. I don't know. It's sad and it's just weird. On October 7th, 2012, Lewis's friends held a memorial service in Hollywood. I'm so sorry I couldn't be more there for you, that I couldn't save you from pain, Bo Garrett said before hundreds of friends who gathered at the Moth Theater. Some of us are built with the tools to survive this world, and some of us are not. The actor with one-time girlfriend Katy Perry in the mid-2000s. This is long. From the outside, the writer's villa today looks exactly as it did before the events of September 26, 2012. The grounds are meticulously landscaped, the bloodstains on the driveway are long gone, but the future of the villa is in flux. Davis's daughter, Margaret Leslie Davis, originally thought of selling the home, though she's now considering keeping it. The writer's villa website that once offered a rambling Spanish home in Los Angeles set up for creative people is offline. The glory days are over. Sad. The whole thing's sad. But like any actor who manages to get some screen time, Johnny Lewis lives forever. Take his performance in Criminal Minds. Oh, that was him. Which you can find on YouTube in a ratty gray t-shirt with his hair disheveled and a wispy beard creeping across his jawline. The 25-year-old is playing a serial killer who's just been caught. An FBI special agent, Joe Mantegna, wants some answer. Why, asked Lewis' character, do you feel compelled to kill? Why? I have no idea why, says Lewis with a wan grimace. I see a guy walking down the street with a stupid look on his face, and I want to bash him over the head with a bottle. To me, that's normal. It's weird to me that no one else feels that way. It's all I think about. I can't stop. I also wonder how much mind control goes into this, you know what I mean? Of course, no one would ever suggest that Lewis was anything like a made-up television character, but for those close to him, differentiating fantasy from reality is a continuous struggle. My wife and I do not believe the allegations he was a peaceful person, his father says. I keep expecting a phone call from him asking me to pick him up from the airport, that he's sorry for what he put us through, and that it was all just an acting exercise to get him ready for some thriller movie where everyone thinks he's dead, but he really isn't. Bill Jensen is a freelance writer based in Phoenix, Arizona, whose articles have appeared in the Village Voice, Miami New Times, and the Long Island Press. This is his first story for Los Angeles Magazine. And that was from January 2014. I will put a link of the article in the description box. Like and subscribe if you choose. Have an amazing day or night wherever you are. Peace.